Greeny's Takes.
As is traditional on these Mondays, I will give you my top 5 takeaways from yesterday in the NFL. Only 2 games, but I have plenty of takes. Here we go.
Number 5.
The NFC game was the worst game ever. Genuinely the worst, most unwatchable, that's a double negative, least watchable big football game I can ever remember watching. I'm not kidding when I told Ryan Clark a few moments ago that at some point in the third quarter of that game, I started reading my book. Bret Easton Ellis has a terrific book out right now. It's called, I just started. It's called The Shards. I'm really excited to read it, and I started reading it yesterday because that game was just horrific. Every now and again, I looked up when it sounded like the voices got a little more excited. God bless those guys at Fox. It's not their fault. Burkhardt and Olsen, who I think are very good, are doing everything they can to try and sell you on the fact that maybe this is still a game, but it was certainly not. Candidly, the minute Josh Johnson came in the game, that game was over. When he went out of it, they should have just literally stopped it. Like, if that was a fight, they would have just, you know what? No one wants to continue playing. Trent Williams just asked for the check, right? Trent Williams just body slammed a guy in a pile because he's just thinking, I don't need to be out here for the last 5 minutes of this. So it's a shame. It's no one's fault. I guess you could give credit to the Eagles defense for knocking those guys out. At the end of the day, that was a non-game where a great game should have been positioned. So that was a terrible shame.
Number 4.
All right, we're going to talk a lot about Patrick Mahomes. I have done it all morning long, and I will continue to. He was brilliant. But the MVP of the AFC game was Chris Jones. He was the most dominant, unstoppable player on the field. He wrecked that game. He had, I think his final numbers were 1.5 sacks and 8 pressures. Is that right?
It was 2 sacks and 8 pressures.
Did they credit him with 2 full sacks? Whatever it was, he destroyed that game. And we have seen defensive tackles do that sort of thing. Aaron Donald obviously being the most obvious example. And if you're a Jet fan like I am, you see Quinnen Williams do it sometimes. Chris Jones did it everywhere. He did it from that D-tackle position, but they move him outside. They're lining him up on the outside, which made it harder. For whatever reason, the Bengals could not fit. I get it that they have backups in there playing on their offensive line. I really thought maybe yesterday they would try and run the ball more. They had great success running the ball against Buffalo. I thought they would try and do that, figuring if you have backup linemen in there, the least they can. What they most likely can do is run block a little as opposed to trying to protect your quarterback. They could not handle Chris Jones. Chris Jones won that game yesterday more than anyone else won.
I think he was the best player on the football field in either of the football fields yesterday. At any position he was. What's most impressive about that ridiculous stat line you just gave is that he rushed a passer 38 times, and on 31 of them was double teamed. There's no good answer for Chris Jones. He's the kind of player that can single-handedly wreck your offensive line, and he was probably the biggest reason they won yesterday.
And he did that yesterday. Greeny's takes coming off of the day in the NFL.
Number 3.
Jalen Hurts did not look good. I mean, candidly, he looked awful. Is that a problem for them in 2 weeks? That I think is going to be the big question going into the Super Bowl. And if you listen to this show, you know I am a huge Jalen Hurts fan and a believer. And obviously, Hembo and Cam now are very much, they borderline consider him a deity. But he's not okay. He's definitely not healthy, and that is definitely a story going into the Super Bowl.
It's affecting the pass game a lot more than it is the run game. Jalen Hurts is only averaging 5.5 yards per pass attempt in the playoffs. He ranked 3rd during the regular season at more than 8. The Eagles are not going to beat Kansas City if he averages 5.5 yards per pass attempt. In 2 games, they've only created 3 explosive plays, and the only one yesterday was the Devontae Smith catch that actually wasn't a catch.
Yeah, and he's got A.J. Brown. I mean, if you've seen them play all year long, you know that's a big part of what they do. And that's one of the fact that they have in their arsenal the ability to beat you with those plays is one of the reasons the running game is so effective, because you can't just crowd the line of scrimmage and sell out and all the other football expressions that people will use. So I am good with, I am good saying that the story of this Super Bowl is that both quarterbacks are hurt. Patrick Mahomes is going to be limping around out there. That's not getting better it might get better, but it's not going to be completely healed in 2 weeks. So how much does that impact the game, and how much is Hurts able to look like the player we watched him be all year long? Those are the storylines heading up to the Super Bowl.
Number 2.
The game opened as a pick'em. So the most recent number I've seen is Philly -2. Is that right? But the game opened as a pick'em. I don't know if this is something we have data on, But do we know how often the Super Bowl has opened as a pick'em game? Is that something someone keeps track of?
We don't track the opening line, no. But there's only a handful of instances.
It cannot have happened much.
I'm sure not. I'm sure not. And I'm guessing as the game gets closer, it will wind up quite close to a pick'em. Even though, like you said, the Eagles are -2 right now. There's a really good chance that between now and then, just like what happened last week, you'll see a lot of public bets come in on Kansas City. I wouldn't be surprised if the game lands as a pick'em, which would be exceedingly rare.
Yeah. Do we know that?
I can
know
look
what
that
the
up,
final spread is?
I do have that.
On how many Super Bowls have kicked off as pick'em games. Again, we don't know that will happen here, but it certainly feels like a possibility when it begins that way. You look that up. You give it to me later. We don't need it this second because I want to make sure I get to this.
Number 1.
So lose the music. So there's something very important we have to talk about. Greeny with you, presented by Progressive Insurance. For a job you will love, visit progressive.com/careers. I love sports. There's nothing I love more than sports. I have dedicated my entire professional life to covering sports, and I have done so because all I ever wanted as a kid who wasn't good enough to play them was to be around sports. So I love sports. So there's nothing in the world I want less than to spend any time on this day talking about something that I perceive to be a significant problem. But for the longest time, the NBA had a major image problem that people believed the league was rigged. People thought the NBA was fixed, that David Stern was deciding who was going to win all these games and all of that. And as I said for 15 years on Mike and Mike in the Morning, two things. One, that is not and never was true. It was never true that the league was dictating the outcomes of these games. These games were not rigged. I know there was a rogue official, all that. That's not what I'm talking about. But the idea that these games were rigged was never true. But what is unquestionable is the fact that perception exists is a problem. If people believe that, that's a problem for a league. A league has nothing if it doesn't have the belief of its integrity.